This is USA Pop News, coming to you live with breaking developments in the Middle East as the Iran conflict intensifies with global repercussions. Just hours after President Trump addressed the nation, vowing to continue military action against Iran without offering a clear end date, financial markets have reacted sharply. U.S. stocks plunged, with the S&P 500 falling 1.2%, the Dow losing 600 points, and the Nasdaq dropping 1.7% after markets opened Thursday. Simultaneously, oil prices surged over 10%, sending U.S. crude above $110 a barrel as traders and analysts brace for extended disruption in the global energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime artery for oil and gas transport, remains virtually paralyzed under Iran's ongoing toll booth enforcement, which requires ships to deviate around Larak Island and report cargo and crew information to Revolutionary Guard-approved intermediaries. According to Lloyd's List Intelligence, traffic is down 94% compared to last year, and only a handful of vessels have complied with the payment requests, while most rely on diplomatic interventions from their home countries. Meanwhile, Iran's state media broadcast footage of missiles prepared by the Revolutionary Guard adorned with anti-Trump messages, with some referencing Jeffrey Epstein, signaling Tehran's escalating propaganda and psychological operations. Public sentiment in Iran is tense, with residents fearing that attacks on infrastructure could disrupt electricity, water, and fuel supplies, leaving everyday life in jeopardy. Taxi drivers, teachers, and local citizens report concerns over shortages of basic goods, with one Tehran resident warning that daily necessities like bread and gasoline could become unavailable if threats to power plants are carried out. The Iranian parliament has also amplified nationalistic messaging, claiming that 7 million citizens are ready to defend the country in the event of a U.S. ground invasion. The paramilitary Basij force, controlled by the Revolutionary Guard, has reportedly begun recruiting children as young as 12, intensifying concerns over the militarization of youth. On the diplomatic front, efforts to mediate the crisis remain fragile. The United Nations has called for restraint from all parties, emphasizing that escalation will only worsen the humanitarian and economic toll. Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the Middle East is on the edge of a wider war, highlighting the risks to global stability, food security, and energy markets. Meanwhile, European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, have dismissed the possibility of reopening the Strait of Hormuz through military action, advocating instead for coordinated negotiations with Iran and a potential international mission to secure shipping lanes after hostilities ease. Across the region, Hezbollah and Iran-aligned groups continue to participate in cross-border operations, launching rockets and drones against Israeli targets, prompting warnings from Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz of very heavy consequences. As the crisis escalates, the world watches nervously, with millions already displaced and humanitarian needs growing across southern Lebanon and Iran. Stay tuned to USA Pop News for live updates, on-the-ground reporting, and expert analysis as this high-stakes situation continues to unfold in real time. This is USA Pop News with live updates on the diplomatic standoff over the Strait of Hormuz. Bahrain's UN proposal aimed at reopening this vital waterway has reached a deadlock as China and Russia reject key parts of the plan. Officials from Beijing and Moscow objected to language allowing all necessary means to protect commercial shipping, saying it goes too far and could escalate tensions rather than resolve them. A UN diplomat, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed that minor revisions to the draft have not broken the impasse. China's UN mission stressed on social media that actions by the UN Security Council should help ease tensions and bring about a ceasefire and the resumption of talks, rather than endorse illegal acts of war, still less add fuel to the fire. Over 40 countries are involved in discussions, focusing on diplomatic and political measures, with military planners considering steps like mine clearing and reassurance for commercial shipping once hostilities ease. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper warned that Iran's blockade is effectively holding the global economy hostage, highlighting the critical nature of the strait for global energy flows. The standoff has caused severe disruptions in shipping, with Iran enforcing a toll booth system, forcing vessels to detour around Larak Island and submit ownership, cargo, and crew information to Revolutionary Guard intermediaries before passage. Shipping traffic is down 94% compared to last year, and only a small number of tankers have fully complied, relying largely on diplomatic interventions from their home countries. Analysts warn that delays in reopening the strait could exacerbate energy price spikes, strain global supply chains, and destabilize an already volatile region. As world leaders debate the next steps, the eyes of the international community remain fixed on this narrow but crucial maritime corridor. Stay tuned to USA Pop News for continuous coverage of this unfolding crisis. This is USA Pop News with a major diplomatic escalation out of South America. Argentina has officially declared Iran's top diplomat, Mohsen Sultani Tehrani, persona non grata, ordering him to leave the country within 48 hours amid skyrocketing tensions between the two nations. This unprecedented move comes just weeks after Argentina designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, a decision that empowers authorities to freeze Iranian assets, block funds, and ban any financial activity by the group within Argentine territory. Argentine officials have cited historical grievances dating back decades, pointing to the 1992 bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, which killed 29 people and injured more than 200, as well as the 1994 attack on the Argentine-Israelite Mutual Association, the deadliest terrorist attack in the country's history, killing 85 and wounding over 300. Both attacks have been directly linked to the Iranian regime and operatives from the Revolutionary Guard, according to long-standing Argentine investigations. The current decision, officials say, reflects a broader stance against Iranian interference in Argentina and the nation's determination to hold Tehran accountable for past and present threats. Iran's foreign ministry responded angrily, accusing President Javier Milei and Foreign Minister Pablo Quirno of acting under the influence of the occupying and genocidal Zionist regime and the United States, and claiming complicity in U.S. attacks against Iran. This public accusation underscores the escalating rhetoric between the two countries, as global attention turns to Argentina's assertive foreign policy stance. Diplomatic sources tell USA Pop News that Sultani Tehrani is now preparing to depart, but questions remain about how this will impact ongoing intelligence, security, and trade operations between the countries. Experts warn that this dramatic move could further strain relations between Tehran and Latin American governments, potentially affecting not only diplomatic channels, but also commercial and humanitarian exchanges. Political analysts note that Argentina's actions may influence other nations in the region to take similarly firm stances against Iran's Revolutionary Guard or its affiliates, especially as tensions in the Middle East and beyond continue to escalate. This comes at a time when U.S.-Iran tensions are already high following President Trump's ongoing military actions in the Middle East, including airstrikes and heightened threats to Iran's infrastructure, creating a global environment of uncertainty and instability. Argentina's decisive measures signal a broader international pushback against Tehran's actions and emphasize the country's zero-tolerance approach toward entities it classifies as terrorist organizations. Authorities have warned that Iran will be held responsible for any further provocations or interference in Argentine affairs. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts behind the scenes continue, with global powers watching closely to see if a further escalation will be avoided, or if Argentina's bold stance will set a precedent for other nations confronting Iran's influence. Citizens and residents in Buenos Aires have reacted with a mix of support and apprehension, recognizing the historical context of Iran's past attacks on Argentine soil while remaining wary of the potential fallout from this diplomatic confrontation. As the countdown begins for Sultani Tehrani's departure, the world watches closely, and USA Pop News will continue to bring real-time coverage of this escalating story, highlighting the complex intersection of history, national security, and international diplomacy in a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape. This is USA Pop News with a critical update from the United Nations regarding the safety of journalists in conflict zones. UN experts are calling for an immediate, full, and independent international investigation into the recent killings of journalists in Lebanon amid ongoing hostilities with Israel. On March 28, Israeli strikes killed Ali Shoaib, a correspondent for Hezbollah's Al-Manar, and two journalists from the Lebanese pan-Arab network Al-Mayadeen, reporter Fatima Ftouni and her cameraman brother Mohammed, while they were covering the intensifying conflict in southern Lebanon. The UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights emphasized that these killings must be examined by an impartial international body to ensure accountability and prevent further violations of international law. Israel's military claimed, without presenting evidence, that Shoaib was targeted because of alleged ties to Hezbollah intelligence operations. However, UN experts strongly rejected this justification, stating that affiliation with media linked to armed groups does not equate to direct participation in hostilities and does not permit targeting journalists. We denounce strongly what has now become a dangerous standard practice of Israel to target journalists and then claim, without credible evidence, that they were involved with armed groups. The UN press release said. The experts highlighted that the only evidence provided was a manipulated photo of Ali Shoaib, which they described as a blatant disregard for international law. The broader picture reveals a grim toll. Since the outbreak of the Gaza conflict in 2023, at least 259 journalists have been killed in regional hostilities, with at least 64 appearing to have been directly targeted. These numbers underscore the peril journalists face while attempting to cover news in areas of active conflict. And the UN is warning that such attacks not only violate human rights, but also threaten press freedom globally. Media organizations and human rights groups are voicing alarm that continued targeting of journalists could lead to further suppression of information and a chilling effect on reporting from the front lines, ultimately leaving civilian populations underrepresented and unprotected. In addition, the international community faces increasing pressure to ensure that journalists are recognized as protected civilians under the Geneva Conventions and that violations are prosecuted at the highest levels. UN officials stress that immediate steps must be taken to safeguard journalists, including strict enforcement of international law, clear accountability mechanisms, and transparent investigation processes. As tensions escalate in southern Lebanon and neighboring regions, the eyes of the world remain on how global powers respond to these egregious attacks. USA Pop News will continue to monitor developments closely, providing live coverage of official statements, field reports, and expert analysis on the ongoing crisis. With both sides engaged in heavy military activity, the safety of journalists remains a pressing concern, and the UN's call for an international investigation could become a defining moment for press freedom and human rights enforcement in conflict zones worldwide. Stay tuned for continuous updates on this critical situation. This is USA Pop News with breaking coverage of the global economic shockwaves following President Donald Trump's latest address on the Iran conflict. In a nationally televised speech, Trump vowed to continue military operations against Iran, but offered no clear end date for the conflict, fueling market turmoil and sending oil prices soaring to levels not seen in years. Wall Street reacted immediately. The S&P 500 fell 1.2%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 600 points, and the Nasdaq plunged 1.7% within minutes of the opening bell, reflecting investor anxiety over prolonged military engagement in the Middle East. Meanwhile, U.S. crude oil prices surged more than 10%, climbing past $110 per barrel, as traders feared continued disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, the critical maritime artery for global oil shipments. Trump's address failed to mention the looming deadline he had previously set for Iran to reopen the strait, leaving investors uncertain about the duration and intensity of military operations. Analysts warn that ongoing instability in this key shipping corridor could severely impact global energy markets, disrupt supply chains, and exacerbate already rising inflation rates. An AP NORC poll conducted in mid-March revealed that nearly 59% of Americans believe U.S. military actions in Iran have gone too far, with many expressing deep concern over the financial consequences of escalating conflict. About 45% of Americans reported being extremely or very concerned about affording gasoline in the coming months, a sharp increase from previous months. The speech also came amid a backdrop of growing skepticism among the U.S. electorate regarding the administration's foreign policy and the wisdom of continued military engagement. In addition, international reactions have been mixed, with allies expressing concern over unilateral military action while calling for a diplomatic resolution to reopen the Strait of Hormuz safely. Experts warn that Trump's aggressive rhetoric, including threats to target Iran's infrastructure and strategic installations, could provoke retaliatory actions, heightening the risk of regional escalation. In Tehran, residents expressed anger and fear, with reports indicating that citizens anticipate potential ground invasions and extended disruptions to daily life, including electricity and water shortages. Economists caution that prolonged conflict could drive energy prices even higher, affecting not just Americans, but consumers and markets worldwide. Financial institutions are preparing for volatility, while global leaders are emphasizing the urgent need for diplomatic channels to prevent further escalation. The markets remain highly sensitive to developments, and analysts are closely monitoring U.S. troop movements, Iranian responses, and regional military activity. The speech underscores the uncertainty facing global investors, international policymakers, and everyday citizens as the conflict continues to unfold. USA Pop News will remain on top of every development, providing live updates on oil markets, stock movements, political analysis, and expert commentary on what this means for the United States and the world. Stay tuned as we continue to track the intersection of military escalation and economic impact, bringing you real-time coverage from Washington, Tehran, and key global financial centers. This is USA Pop News with urgent coverage from Lebanon, where the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, fueled by Iran-backed operations, has triggered a deepening humanitarian crisis. Over the past 24 hours alone, Israeli strikes killed 27 people and injured more than 100, according to Lebanon's health ministry, bringing the total death toll since the war began to 1,345, including 125 children and 91 women. The strikes have also wounded over 4,000 civilians and targeted critical infrastructure, with 82 emergency medical facilities hit and at least 5 hospitals evacuated as precautionary measures against a widening Israeli ground invasion in southern Lebanon. The escalating conflict has displaced over 1 million Lebanese, creating urgent needs for shelter, food, water, and medical assistance, while the international community grapples with ways to respond. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that Israel's actions point to a broader strategy, including the creation of buffer zones and the potential occupation of up to 10% of Lebanese territory, particularly south of the Litani River. These moves threaten to exacerbate an already fragile humanitarian situation, displacing tens of thousands more civilians and intensifying the chaos in a region still recovering from previous conflicts. Despite Lebanon's efforts to disarm Hezbollah and enforce state authority over non-state armed groups, Iranian-backed militant operations continue, including rocket and drone strikes targeting Israel in retaliation. Salam emphasized that Lebanon is the victim of a war of others, caught between external forces whose actions directly endanger Lebanese civilians. Hospitals, schools, and residential areas have all been affected, with images showing destroyed homes, damaged public infrastructure, and terrified families seeking refuge amid ongoing airstrikes. Medical staff are operating under extreme pressure, treating casualties with limited resources while facing repeated threats to their own safety. International organizations and humanitarian agencies are sounding alarms over the scale of displacement and the mounting strain on essential services, calling for immediate access to affected areas and support for medical evacuation efforts. The conflict's impact extends beyond Lebanon's borders, with fears that the escalation could draw in neighboring countries and further destabilize the already volatile Middle East. The UN and other diplomatic actors are urging a ceasefire, emphasizing that only dialogue and restraint can prevent further loss of life and infrastructure. Meanwhile, the continued firing of rockets by Hezbollah and other Iran-supported groups into northern Israel has intensified the cycle of retaliation, prolonging the conflict and increasing civilian suffering on both sides. As Lebanese authorities struggle to maintain order and deliver aid, Prime Minister Salam is calling for international support to prevent further devastation, stressing the need for urgent diplomatic efforts to halt the hostilities. USA Pop News will continue to provide live updates on the humanitarian situation, military developments, and diplomatic negotiations, bringing viewers on-the-ground perspectives from Beirut and southern Lebanon. This ongoing crisis highlights the intersection of regional power struggles and civilian vulnerability, underscoring the critical need for immediate international intervention and relief. Stay tuned as we continue to report live on the human impact of the Lebanon conflict, the unfolding military operations, and global efforts to prevent further escalation.